Well, hello, my name is Matthew Taylor, and welcome to our Bush Broadcast Spring webinar, coming to you from the Bush Heritage Office in Naarm in Melbourne. We're joining you here from the land of the Wurundjeri traditional owners of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us today for the webinar. We recognise the remarkable Australian environment that we're all striving to conserve is land that's never been ceded. And of course, it's a joint responsibility that we work on together. Now, this location is wonderful. It's the middle of the city, but we're right in spitting distance of the Yarra River, or Birrarung, as the Wurundjeri used to call it. It's a glorious place. On the right morning, it's a place of lovely mists and shadows. It's got a lot of cultural significance, both tangible and intangible. And of course, it was a vital life source and food source for the Wurundjeri. So a very spiritual and a very functional place. We're very fortunate today to be joined by our wonderful CEO, Rachel. Thank you for joining us. We got a whole hour in her calendar. You don't know how hard that is to do. So thank you for making the time available amongst your international and travel within Australia. So of course, we're going to use the time wisely and get onto some big questions. Now, as always, please use the chat function at the bottom to put any questions in. We'll get to those at the end. We've already got a few that have come through in advance, which is fantastic. And we will cover all those when we get to the end. So let's get started. I think, Rachel, many people will have come across you at some point, but not everybody. So perhaps if you could share with us what's your particular passion for nature and what was your path? How did you come to Bush Heritage? How were we so lucky to get you?
Oh, that's a very kind way to ask that question. Thanks, Matthew. Hello, everyone. What's my particular passion for nature? Look, I was just one of those kids. I truly believe I was born with the nature gene. I don't know any other way to describe it because there isn't one moment where I can define in my childhood. I went, see, nature's wonderful. I must protect it. If there was a creek, I was in it. If there was a tree, I was up it. I was very lucky for a big part of my childhood to be raised on a farm, and I was mindful not everybody has that nature gene because my sister actually was always indoors, and my parents were trying to get her outdoors. Their worry for me was how far I would go. They were trying to get me indoors more. We had a system at 6 o'clock, the lights would flash on at the farm, and that meant I had to come in. So I've just got that nature gene, and I get to work in an organisation now with others that share that passion, which is quite incredible, and meet supporters that also have that nature gene. And how did I get to Bush Heritage? Well, actually, when this incredible job came up at this incredible organisation, I received a call from a headhunting agency. I was Chief Conservation Officer at the time at WWF Australia, another great org. And they called me on a busy day. And to be honest, I originally said, oh, thanks for the call, but no, I've got a great team. I'm loving what I'm doing. And it wasn't until later that evening I was trying to get to sleep. I had this nagging feeling. And I thought, I think I was too hasty at winding that call up because I've always admired Bush Heritage.
Yes.
And I was feeling acutely aware, based on the role that I was in, of this critical decade, and very much often found myself asking that question of what more will we stand to lose?
Yes.
What places simply won't be here for my children to go and see, and for our wildlife to continue to explore and thrive in, and the opportunity to join Bush Heritage and be part of an organisation that's doing our utmost to protect and stand up for those patches of healthy country that are simply too precious to lose, ended up calling me in, and I picked up the phone a few days later and went, actually, tell me more about that great job.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you've been with us for, I think, 20 months now, getting on for 2 years. Yeah. So perhaps you could share, because we've had so many amazing highlights in the last 2 years, haven't we? It's been a very different and very busy time for us all, which you've been part of. So perhaps you could share some of the highlights for you.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, when you think about it, what we've managed to pack in. Well, I'm going to say this next month, I'm going to step on my 30th reserve.
That's good going.
So that's
good going.
Isn't it?
Out of 46, approximately.
That's right. That's right. So getting out on reserve, walking with staff, with partners, with supporters. It's incredible privilege. And I mean, how lucky am I? I get to go to some of the most beautiful and remote parts of Australia, and I love standing out on reserves and hearing the origin story of each reserve. I get a lot of hope from that. Someone went, not this patch. It's simply too precious. And every reserve has its own story. And the first reserve I stepped on will probably always be a highlight that comes to mind, partly because it was the first reserve ever for me to step on to. That was on Noongar country at Red Mort.
Yes, in WA.
WA in the Fitzsterling. And I remember standing at the fence line, and I know we use this picture a lot, so some of our supporters may be able to recall it, and just looking at the revegetation work that had been done in the past, 7 years, I think it was. And then over the other side, just that denuded landscape.
Bare paddock.
Bare paddock, just bare paddock. And Alex, the healthy landscape manager at the time, was talking about all the threatened species that had returned, all but one, into that landscape. And was sharing the vision that's bigger than the Bush Heritage vision. It's the Gondwana Link vision. And it was that moment of feeling like, wow, this is, it's that vision bigger than self, bigger than our own org that we're contributing to. And to be able to hear this, malleefowl in the background, it was a special moment. So yeah, that was wonderful. The next reserve I visited was Ora Ora and Liffey Valley, and again,
Where we started.
yeah, that's where Bush Heritage started. So that was pretty special because I just had lunch with Bob Brown, and he'd shared that origin story of Bush Heritage, and then I stood in Liffey Valley, and I just took that moment to look around and think this would have been, and I'm not going to use the word lost because I have a good, great supporter out there that says we haven't misplaced it. It's been destroyed, Rachel. Use that word. So, it would have been destroyed. Had, Bob not put himself on the line and taken out that loan, and from there Bush Heritage started. So that was a great highlight as well. We've had a lot of acquisitions in the last 20 months in doing our best to live up to our promise to deepen and double by 2030. Every acquisition is a moment where you pinch yourself and you think, oh my goodness, thousands of people have pitched in to make this happen. More often than not, I mean, Dodgy Downs, was a real win, especially because the name didn't help us.
Followed by Nil Desperandum.
Yeah, that's right. Sandstrom was one of those. That was special as well. Getting a chance to sign that. So look, we've just had some wonderful wins in the last 20 months. Then, of course, there's partnership work. Another highlight I remember I had to pinch myself was standing with Jara when we launched the Warraka Gold Canoe.
The management plan for that region.
At Ballarat Reserve and Central Victoria, and just hearing that it took 4 years to develop that landscape scale plan, but it was done the right way. And it gave me a lot of hope for that landscape. And yeah, that was a really beautiful moment as well. Getting a grant from government to utilise AI to try to get better at feral control. The Game Changers grant, led by Dave Smith. That was another exciting moment because again, it's a signal of promise that we're going to continue to disrupt and do things differently and get even better at what we do. I could go on. No one's been sitting idle over the last 20 months, that's for sure, nor over the last 34 years.
Absolutely not. And when you mentioned origin story, I know that's equally true of some of our staff out on reserves, isn't it? That I always ask them, what's your personal origin story? How did you make this place? And the depth of love and connection to the landscape they look after is amazing. Really, really engaged, really passionate about the place. And it's 22 million hectares of land that we're managing, isn't it? So there's a lot of staff involved in that. So I'd imagine you've probably had some great staff interactions over the last time.
Gosh, absolute highlight. I mean, it's an incredible organisation with incredible people make incredible organisations. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I've just not long returned from Yorka Reserve. We've got a new reserve manager there, and being able to hear about how important that reserve is to the new reserve manager, who once took his wife, who had had a terrible injury post an accident, came out of hospital, had legs in cast, and took her out onto Yorka Reserve to cheer her up, and is now the reserve manager out on Yorka Reserve, and it's just
Fantastic. Well, let's turn to some of those big questions that we mentioned earlier on. It will be, I'd love to hear your view on how the work that Bush Heritage does is actually directly addressing the sort of twin crises of biodiversity loss and, of course, climate change that makes everything worse.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because if you think about the Australian school system, we all learn about habitat in about grade 5. So I think
Yes.
when people hear about the work that Bush Heritage is able to undertake, thanks to our supporters, it's quite clear how we're helping the biodiversity crisis because people think, okay, you're protecting habitat. We all know animals need habitat, and people's mind go there straight away, let alone just the fact that our flora species also deserve to be part of Australia's future. So the way in which we help tackle the biodiversity crisis is fairly apparent. What I find is that a lot of people don't extend necessarily our work as seeing it as a very genuine and very important part of the solution towards climate change.
Yeah.
Because each of these beautiful landscapes, these healthy landscapes that are standing tall today because of the work that we lead at Bush Heritage, they are absorbing carbon from the atmosphere. And one of the most effective ways that we have available to us right now to tackle climate change is to ensure that the biodiversity that is intact and healthy continues to stand tall and provides that service to us all as a carbon sink. And so that's super important,
Yes.
and not always recognised as demonstrable climate action, and yet it very much is.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if it's degraded or getting worse, then you've got to turn that round to have an even bigger impact, don't you? As well as just maintaining it. So,
And even there's more and more studies coming through. We often think about the, species like bandicoots and potoroos as ecosystem engineers.
yes,
They're little climate allies because the work that they're doing in turning our soil and helping those ecosystems thrive, it means that we are absorbing more carbon from the atmosphere. So,
yes.
yeah.
And science is just giving us more and more examples of where an intact ecosystem is helping with that crisis, isn't it? Like soil crusts. Who knew anything about soil crusts a few years ago? And now it's a really incredibly complex, incredibly important piece of the landscape that sheep and cattle and donkeys and goats and will damage. So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, perhaps you could give us a sense of what are the key things that we need to keep our eye on to ensure our success going forward. It's clear that we're doing a good job, and I can say that after being here 10 years. It's a wonderful organisation. We're clearly doing a good job, but what do we need to stay focused on to keep that moving forward?
Look, we need to continue to be bold and ambitious because the times that we're in call for that. And so I don't think we can ever just say we're doing a good job and we'll just trundle along
Yes.
with BAU. Australia will benefit the back of our
Yes.
ambition. And so, our supporters will also back us in because they
Yes.
know that it's worthy of the times that we're in. So there's that. I think a big part of our success to date is we truly are a science-based organisation. And so continuing to draw on the best available science to inform our
Yes.
decisions.
Yeah.
Our partnership approach is a key part to our success, including right-way partnerships with
Yes.
Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander groups. We have 39 active Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander partnerships at the moment. We want to deepen those and grow those. Equally, our partnerships with agriculturalists,
Yeah.
farmers, again, that's an area where we're getting strong.
Yes.
I think I would add we are being rewarded right now, I truly believe, for being so focused on getting boots on ground. And that's part of our success as well. We're in a critical decade. So many people feel that palpable urgency.
What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
And I've had to pinch myself a number of times in the last 2 years. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis here
Yes.
in Australia, and yet I just ran through a list of property acquisitions that were enabled by Australians.
Yeah.
Every time another 600 or 700 new supporters come in, each time we go out there and ask for help.
Yes.
People put their hands in their pocket and continue to chip in because they see it as living legacy on behalf of Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say not taking our eye off those elements for sure.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about some of the really big picture international issues. I know you've recently got back from New York, where you were at Climate Week, and that was an amazing opportunity for Bush Heritage to partner with AWC and Karakad Kanji Trust to put on an event and talk to philanthropists and supporters in the US about what's Australia doing as a whole. And that's more of that collaboration, isn't it? So, what can we do to do that? So, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, how that collaboration worked, and what's inspired you? What are the takeaways from that?
Yeah, sure. I think when you take a step back and you look at all we stand to lose, and I don't mean Bush Heritage, I mean Australia stands to lose between now and 2030. Some, ecosystem collapse and bioregions that are genuinely very, very threatened, some of which just won't be here by 2030 if we don't get protected areas right and that representation right. Um, it's very clear that whilst philanthropy has largely gotten us to where we are today in our 34-year history and private land conservation sector more broadly, there is not enough across Australia to rely on philanthropy alone if we really want to get big scaled wins. So we need to continue to go deeper with Australian philanthropy, but equally, some of the places we're protecting and uh, trying to get under protection, they're globally significant. They're not just going to be a loss to Australia if they fall, they will be a loss globally. The world won't have them anymore. And so Climate Week felt like the right place to take that message and to try to take some of the beauty of Australia's landscapes. There are representatives at Climate Week from nations whose back are generally against the wall with biodiversity crisis. There are some countries out there that have lost almost all their biodiversity. Anyone who's been to Europe won't struggle to imagine some of the European nations, for example. The UK has lost a significant amount of biodiversity, over 95% in some parts. So Australia's not there. We've still got so much to protect and so much that we can conserve, not just for Australians, but for the world. And so the aim of the trip and the collaboration was not to go and fundraise for one project or one org, but to take that message into the global domain where people are thinking about solutions for climate change. And again, reminding people that protecting biodiversity is climate action. And so I had to pinch myself a few times. I've mentioned that, but it was another one of those moments where Leonardo DiCaprio's foundation, Rewild, they agreed to host us, and they were incredible hosts. The Australian American Association provided us with a room and a venue right in the heart of New York, and Australian Ethical helped cover the costs of the event, and we had wonderful, KKT, AWC, and Bush Heritage all standing there making the case, provocation to the world that this is the right time to invest in Australia to help us protect landscapes that simply are irreplaceable. If they fall, and they're a loss to the world. And the message was really well received. The venue was packed. We had a waiting list. I know. And
we were the new kids in town.
We were the new kids in town.
Excellent.
What have they got to say? And we also tried to not have PowerPoint slides. We brought a really unique, culturally appropriate way of sharing the beauty of Australia's landscapes through music, through art.
And some traditional owners.
And traditional custodian voices. And it was a beautiful event. And I'm hoping that we've drummed up support for Australian landscapes that we'll benefit from.
Well, very encouraging that I think that North Americans are taking an interest in the opposite side of the globe, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, and it was an interesting time to be in New York for sure, because the UN summit was on as well, and so it was a time when people may have seen in the media, President Donald Trump had called climate change the greatest scam. And so you had New York Climate Week happening at the same time that was being said. And if anything, I felt as though it galvanized Climate Week. People from all around the world were there to talk about big solutions, scalable solutions, and there was almost this bonding through adversity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting time to be there.
Well, wonderful. I know on the way back you weren't able to join another big event, but yeah, I know you sent many of our leadership team, didn't you, to the Australian Land Conservation Alliance (ALCA) conference that was happening in Cairns, and I can't pronounce that. Sorry, Cairns, um, which had about 400 conservation practitioners, I believe. Have you had some feedback from those guys about that agenda and how the conversation was going on within Australia?
Yeah, I have. We had great representation at the ALCA conference. Three of out of four of Bush Heritage's Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander co-leadership group attended. So that's Miss Mitchell there on the screen. So I know Vicky Parsley told me this morning that there was a really strong theme about right way. When we talk about right way, uh, bringing knowledge together to walk together. There was a lot of conversation around Indigenous-led, First Nations-led conservation and how, as a sector, we can support that further and deepen our impact further. Um, Spoke to Ian McConnell also this morning, and he mentioned that there was a fairly strong focus on what we call blind tenure conservation. So, yes, government might own this patch of land, and private land conservationists might own this patch of land, and a farmer might own this patch of land. Our wildlife don't know who owns what, and yet we're managing and giving each patch slightly different treatment, and how we can build more partnerships to have blind tenure wins that actually give us more scale.
Mm.
There was also conversations around natural capital markets and how we can unlock funding to advance landscape scale protection in Australia. Spoke to Bruce Webber this morning as well. He's our fairly new to Bush Heritage, our Executive Manager of Science and Conservation, and he said if he had to distill one message from ALCA, it was that urgency was really ringing through. This is the critical decade. I think we've got about, last time I counted, 52 months
Yes.
till 2030. And Bruce said there was a real acknowledgement of what we will continue to be destroyed, and how important it is that we band together to make those critical decisions around which patches and which bioregions we ensure we get adequate representation within the protected area reserve
Yes.
system.
Wonderful. And the mood, would you say the mood was optimistic? Because we're always balancing between the optimism of taking action, as Bob Brown would say, take action, that will make you feel better.
Yeah,
And of course, with the horrible things that are happening, was the mood upbeat?
no doubt. I mean, I've been to ALCA a number of times, and I know from even colleagues that attended ALCA last week who were giving me calls throughout, and updating me on certain things. It's energizing to be in a room full of values-aligned practitioners who are looking at the modelling, looking at the same science you're looking at, and putting our heads together to say we're better together. How do we partner better?
Yeah.
How do we unlock funds better? How do we pool our superpowers, just like we did in New York with AWC and KKT? And I've no doubt people found it energizing.
Yes, fantastic. Well, we talked about collaboration earlier, and outside of the work we do, there's that ongoing need, as you said, for being tenure blind, but also collaborating across the different influencing bodies that can make a difference. One of the commonest questions we get asked is, what's government doing? And it's always a challenge, isn't it? And I know that's something that you've initiated here is a much stronger involvement with government to have conversations. Can you give us a sense of how the government, corporate, environmental, academia, how that needs to expand and grow, and where are we on track with getting the best from all of those?
Well, I mean, if I touch on government to begin with, because I do think just more broadly, and it's not going to be rocket science and come across as new to anyone, cross-sectoral partnerships are powerful. And again, I don't think when we look at the scale of the wins that we want to land between now and 2030, what's still out there that could benefit from protection?
Yes.
We don't want to be limited by one fundraising model when there are some bioregions, for example, let's talk about the Ainsley Uplands, that's in North Queensland, wraps around Townsville through Cairns area. The price per hectare is really hard to get a business case up for national parks in that area, for Indigenous protected areas, private land organisations like us to be able to afford the type of connectivity pieces. But we can't say, oh, well, it's too pricey, so we'll lose it. 20% of that bioregion's already irrevocably lost, and that's on the government website, acknowledged. Those freshwater systems we can't bring back. 93%, I think was the stat I read, is currently grazed.
Yeah.
And so it's going to go downhill. And so those last remaining patches that are standing that bring connectivity into that system, they're just calling for protection. But no one org can step in and do it.
Too big.
Why that's an underrepresented ecosystem, because it has been too big up till now to get that business case, which is why I'm a strong advocate for getting as many people at the table as we can.
Yeah.
Corporations. So, when I was in New York, I visited Patagonia and shared a story of that bioregion with Patagonia, and they're interested in helping us chip in. And government, possibly also because of my background, I have sat on advisory boards to national parks. I was an advisor to the Threatened Species Commissioner. I'm aware that funds can be unlocked from government when it's the right moment. The science is strong. And I think organisations like Bush Heritage have so much to share with government, because we just, for 34 years, built on our knowledge and deepened our knowledge. And we sometimes have at our fingertips modelling, scientific modelling, for example, or partnerships that can be mobilised in a way that government can't do without us. So I think we're going to have more impact for Healthy Country if we work with government. And I'm really hoping that we can have some big wins between now and 2030 that bring large-scale connectivity between our reserves and national parks, for example, where it's needed most.
And that might be a model where you have government funding, federal, state, and private philanthropy through.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's been done before, but we need to turbocharge it and scale it up.
Yes, well, it's certainly something I think our reputation and the respect that's coming from some of the key government departments is substantially improved in the last couple of years, hasn't it? And we're now involved in ways we weren't previously.
And the thing that we're benefiting from, or I hope we will benefit from, because I don't want to overstate it either, the Australian government has signed on to the 30 by 30 global targets, which is acknowledging that we do have significant loss and we want to protect 30% of oceans and 30% of land. Now, I was in Canada as part of those negotiations, so I'm very, very aware that that's not just about protecting any hectare anywhere. It's about getting representation from different ecosystems, grasslands, woodlands, rainforests, you name it, and making sure we're getting fair representation. And I think that government are going to need to really take some big strides between now and 2030 if they're going to reach that target. And they will take better moves forward, partnering with organisations like us.
Indeed. Fantastic. Well, very encouraging. And more on the sort of staying hopeful side of things. There are always these overwhelming challenges. We all know them. We all experience them in the fight to protect nature. And almost every week, a friend of mine says, "How do you keep going, Matthew? Don't you get depressed? Don't you despair?" And it's back to that. How do you stay grounded? How do you stay hopeful as an individual and as a parent or as a person at the head of a great organization? So I'd love to know how you do that personally, and anything that you can share in terms of how you keep that, guard that space that says we can make a difference, we will, and motivate people to move forward, particularly our wonderful supporters who are contributing to that.
Yeah. But I don't struggle to find hope at all. Probably, we talked about 34 years of demonstrable impact just from bush heritage alone. I find 1.45 million hectares is standing tall today because thousands of Australians said, no, we're going to pitch in and be a part of something bigger than ourselves. I take a lot of hope from that, just our history alone. From our partnerships, people partnering with us, not for self-gain, but to be part of something bigger than themselves and to be part of a legacy for Australia. I take hope from the fact that we talked about protecting biodiversity as climate action. Nature-based solutions are there for the taking, and I truly believe that we're going to have more and more light bulb moments between now and 2030 and 2050. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard people talk about technology is going to save us when it comes to climate change. We're going to get this technological device that draws carbon from the atmosphere and we can scale it. Nature's innovated that one already.
Already done that. Yeah.
Trees are scalable, planting scalable, and those solutions are there for the taking. And I think we just need to find a way to unlock the capital to get that scale in. So I don't struggle to find hope, and I also keep a close eye on, where the R&D is going from Australia and other countries like India and China and Indonesia around trying to find solutions to export renewable energy. Someone will win that race. It will happen. So I take hope in the spirit of humanity as being part of something bigger than themselves. But what tech will come and disrupt us? But equally, I just don't know what we'll lose still.
Yes.
What we'll lose between now and 2030. We'll get there, but what will we lose between now and then? And so, it's a pleasure to be in this organisation, to be part of something
Yes.
that's growing
Yes.
and building momentum towards, protecting as much healthy country as we can based on where the science directs us. A question I don't get asked is what's been one of my low lights since I've joined. And yes, I'm hopeful, but I also don't want to pretend that all is beer and skittles and that I'm not attuned to the losses and the challenges. Some of the hardest parts in the last 20 months have been the properties we haven't managed to acquire.
Yeah. The ones you can't see. Yeah.
There was a beautiful freshwater lagoon system in Queensland that had more threatened species on that than anything found in Queensland's national parks, and that was based on Queensland government's assessment. And whilst trying to pull together the business case to secure that, mining started up and the destruction of that ecosystem and the breaking of it up to sell to development, etc. Those moments hurt because that's not going to be something you can turn out. But I equally draw energy from those moments to get the next win.
Excellent. And what would you say to our wonderful supporters to encourage and perhaps direct where they can make a difference at the local scale? Because everybody's got their local environment, their local patch. Even this weekend, friends of mine I was staying with, for the first time said, I'm going to be retiring and getting a bit of money from, inheriting it. And I'd like to buy a big patch of land. You do that, don't you, Matthew? And we had to have that conversation about scale and appropriate fit and what did you want. But the fact they were thinking about that was just magnificent. First time it's happened in knowing them for 30 years. It's the right moment. So everybody has the opportunity, don't they? Whether it's that situation or contributing as a volunteer, doing revegetation or weeding, both of which I do as well. What would you say are the things that people can look out for themselves?
Yeah.
I've just listed them all there. Sorry.
Gosh, we could list things all day. Well, first of all, to our supporters, I'd say thank you. Before I even gave any advice of any kind, because if you pick up our most recent impact report, which a lot of work goes into monitoring our impact on ground, and it's demonstrable. So we're lucky that we're able to, look at those maps and see that the healthy country is thriving or being maintained. Very odd circumstances going backwards, but the vast majority all are heading in the right direction. That's because of our supporters. So thank you. Thank you for the wins that we've mentioned that have landed recently and over the last 34 years, really. And for enabling us to employ and have incredible staff and to have the partnerships and the projects building momentum that we've got. You've enabled that. So thank you. I would say I'd encourage everyone right now. Australia's in a really interesting context because we've talked about government before. Budgets for biodiversity is lower than it's been in decades, at a time when you would have expected it to be higher. We've talked about climate action, biodiversity action, this crisis that we're part of. It's a global crisis. It's lower. And sometimes what can happen when you're in a resource scarcity context is we start to lower our ambition to match the resourcing of the time. I'd encourage people to continue to support back your friends, your family, organisations that are being bold and ambitious and are putting forward a vision that's worthy of the times. We need the Australian community to talk big for the environment because we need big wins. We don't want flash in the pan little wins dripping through between now and 2030. Back the political leaders that are talking big, bold, ambitious visions. So there is that. Equally, volunteer your time if you can, and I'm sure there are many people that do on this webinar because they do some of my highlights too, spending time with volunteers. Oh my gosh. Again, where that vision and that project is worthy of the times that we're in. And you talked about a range of things that people can do in their own backyard. Equally, the products that we buy. Yes. Those materials have all come from a patch of healthy country somewhere. And so, again, just being mindful of what fibres we're purchasing and where they've come from, supporting circular economy. There's so much can be done and so much we are doing, and of course, continuing to back any vision out there that protects healthy country and keeps it standing because whether or not, I know I don't need to say this to an audience tuning into a webinar like this one, we value nature inherently for its natural beauty, its right to be, its intrinsic value. Others might value nature for its ecosystem services, but we also don't know which of these reserves or patches of healthy country may have the last remaining orchid species that could be a cure for cancer, or it's really are leaving a legacy that I think which is why we are all here, all on this webinar, trying to be part of something bigger.
Yes. Excellent, thank you. Well, listen, to finish off this part of the conversation, it's a bit of a cheeky question, but if there was like, if I could give you $500 million today, just out of the blue, what would you do with that? Where would you direct that funding?
Yes, I don't find that hard to sum it off.
Oh,
I lay awake thinking about that. Wouldn't that be nice one day? I honestly would put it in a fund on behalf of Australia.
yes.
We don't do this work just to grow bush heritage. We do this work to protect landscapes on behalf of Australia. So I think it would be wonderful to have a fund that's being invested and that actually has the returns from those investments growing the size of that fund each year. Yeah. And then having, similar to what was a much smaller example in the past, there was once a time where there was a fund on behalf of the federal government where people could unlock money to purchase conservation reserves. We need to, match those dollars so a corporation could put money in to unlock those funds. An organisation like us could put money in to unlock those funds. And then I would be getting in very quickly and moving on those bioregions like the Ainslie Uplands, like the Brigalow, like the Wheat Belt in WA, where we don't have a lot of time left if we don't want to be sitting here in 52 months saying that they're irrevocably gone and they're underprotected, which means we're not getting a seed from anywhere else where it's now or never. We'll now be deploying those funds hard and fast to build connectivity into those landscapes through partnerships that bring returns to community, traditional custodians, and it draws on the best available science.
Excellent. Well, I mentioned that number just because wouldn't it be nice if that was our revenue or turnover in a couple of years' time? It'd be substantial growth, but okay, let's get to some of the questions. We've had quite a lot of questions coming in, so we'll see if we can get through those. First up is a question from Michelle, and she's asking if you'd be able to give us a bit of a comment on the nature repair market.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned before, some people value nature because of the ecosystem services. It cleans our water and it purifies our air and all the rest. How do you put a price on that? It's very challenging, but there are people out there trying to do it because it's how society works. If something doesn't have a monetary value, some people's value system, they won't move in and protect that biodiversity. And so I think the nature repair market is worth trying.
Yes.
And I think it's going to require very, very clear standards and they're yet to land. It needs to ensure very clear compliance. I think we've learned a lot as a country, but also globally from the carbon markets where compliance is key because not all projects are designed equally. And we would hate to see, we don't have time for the nature repair market not to truly reward and unlock funds for genuine new attributions on country that are bringing biodiversity gains. But it's worth a try. And we at Bush Heritage are offering our support and services to help develop some of the methods that will inform the nature repair market.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next question's from Anthea, and it's asking about where is it that people can come, and the public can come as well as supporters to visit our reserves. And now, of course, there's several around the country. The challenge always is these are big properties. They're mostly incredibly remote, aren't they? So it's a challenge to do this, but we recognise it's a really important part of people experiencing and engaging and witnessing and experiencing. So we do have a page on the website which lists the various ways that people can do that. Some reserves we've been able to set up where you can go and camp, which I find is the best way of experiencing a place. You wake up, you go to bed with the sounds of the evening, you wake up in the morning, and then you go and explore. And boy, it's wonderful. So places like Bulkamata, just across the border from New South Wales in South Australia, magnificent place. Pretty easy to get to, and you can camp there. Carnarvon Reserve up in Queensland, same sort of thing. So Megan, our producer, will put the link to that page in the chat. Please go and have a look there. In addition to those sites, we have sort of open days where people can come along and we'll do a guided tour and a walk to showcase the reserve, which is always lovely. And then, of course, although it's not getting on reserve, we do events each year in most of the major capital cities where we can at least talk and show wonderful pictures and have conversations. So there are ways to do it, and I'd certainly encourage people. You mentioned earlier on Ura, where Bob Brown lived for a while and is the sort of the home and the starting point for both the Australian Greens, the Wilderness Society, and Bush Heritage, three great organisations started by him. If anybody's in Northern Taz, I'd strongly recommend that's an open access. Bob actually has a sign that says "Trespassers Welcome," which I always think is a glorious way of articulating how the landscape should be. So please go and have a look at those. There's lots of ways to engage with us. And of course, talk to us if you want to talk on any subject. We're always happy to have conversations. So moving on to the next one. The question is, this is a question about if, from Owen, it's about considering leaving a gift in your will as a bequest. And the question's really, Rachel, you could probably answer this one best. Owen's asking for a sense of where that money will go, how much that money might be tied up in internally, in admin and staff costs, and how much is on the ground. Can you share a bit of a sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for giving it your consideration because, my goodness, they're such generous gifts, and every time we are alerted of one, it's
a joy.
It's moving. Yeah. It's moving. That's what it is. So thank you. We work really hard to ensure, and we've got a commitment here at Bush Heritage that always over 70% of any revenues or fundraising that comes into our organisation each year goes to direct conservation work, so it was just set at 75% in the last financial year's direct conservation work. Then there's about another 8% that goes into our sort of communications, marketing, events like this, actually. They sort of communicate what's done with. About 9% goes into fundraising. More funds to do our important work. And what some people call enabling services or administration sits at about 8%. So the most of, and that's really important, we have to pay our legal team to do the work that they do, for example, and people understand where that money goes to. Majority of the gift in wills that we receive are untied, so people trust Bush Heritage to direct that money to the highest impact projects, and so again, they're incredible gifts to receive, and I hope that answers that question.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you. Now, a question from Michael, which is about all the monitoring we do, because obviously in conservation, if you're measuring impact, you have to know what a difference you're making, which means you need to know the base level you started from when you acquired a reserve, and then what's the difference? How are we making a difference on the sort of conservation targets we have? So I think the question here is how much monitoring do we do at sites? And I think part of the question Michael's saying is that information available to the public or to science for analysis and publishing? And I guess that's because, data can sit quietly on a shelf, can't it? Or it could be used and shared and used in broader programs.
Yeah. So there's and as we do monitoring and evaluation, of course, so we can actually ensure that we hand on heart delivering the impact we're promising, which is, healthy country protected forever. And so we need to know where our ecological values across our landscapes are improving and thriving and where we're managing to maintain, or if there's some dropping back so that we can make the decisions as managers to direct more funds, or sometimes it's not even just about money, it's about different your approach. So we have a conservation and science team. They support our healthy landscape managers across each of the areas that we work. We also have ecologists for each of those healthy landscape priority areas. And they help advise and set up the research, collect the data, and they also support the reserve managers who are doing a lot of that work as well. We also have field officers who undertake some of our research. And then we have increasingly more and more research partnerships. So we partner with academic institutions. And the way in which we monitor often can be different for different reserves. So I know out in Tassie, we've got Matt Appleby, who's out there doing transect plots because he's counting grasses and making sure that, these rare grasses in one of the most threatened ecosystems in the whole of Australia are in fact increasing and not decreasing. There are some reserves where we're getting better at using imaging via drones, for example, and technology to get a better handle on just some of our reserves that are enormous, and doing a transect plot by plot on Evelyn Downs, for example, which is almost the size of ACT. It's just not going to be the right approach. And we're leaning more and more on technological solutions. And I know Bruce Webber, he's doing this IRO. He's very keen to continue to explore different ways. The best way probably to look at how we measure or what we measure is to pick up an impact report, because there you can get a sense of, we have a system across bush heritage where we log all of our threatened species data, so we can actually tell you exactly how many threatened species are found on our reserves. Some we have better data than others, a better handle on whether or not those populations are booming or not. That's just based on resourcing. But yeah, it's an area that we're continuing to deepen our efforts.
Yeah. And I guess there's examples like the ecoacoustic work, isn't it, where we're working with national bodies to get data from across bush heritage sites and farm sites and other private land, in order to put together a national database so that we can understand through the use of sound monitors that are sitting out there remotely what's happening in the landscape, what's the critical sounds you should be hearing, and if you're not hearing it, what have you lost? Or if you are hearing something new, what does that say about the impact you're doing? So our general approach is an open one, isn't it? Open sharing in terms of our data, and I think maybe that's partly
That's right.
the question was.
And our chief scientist, Headley, he works partly for an academic institution and partly for Bush Heritage by design, so that we can continue to have those partnerships and get publications out of the
Yes,
knowledge that we gain
yes,
from our reserves. So we are trying our best to publish when
yes,
we have the data and it can go through peer review. Um, and I've got to say the technology I love most
yes,
is camera trapping,
yes,
because I often am quite desk bound, and all of a sudden I'll just get an image that we've picked up from a camera trap of a new colony of Mariba rock wallabies, for example, and it'll make my day to be able to be living in a time where an ecologist on the other side of the country can share and text through an image
yes.
of species movements is quite incredible.
Okay, well, moving on from the measuring the good, there's a question here about how are we doing with cats? And I guess that's a question which comes up all the time. So it'd be wonderful to get a sense of, and you mentioned the Game Changers grant a little earlier, how are we doing with dealing with feral cats and that eternal problem?
Yeah, I mean, our part of bush heritage theory of change is providing movement for species through a landscape, which means we don't have the benefit of building those fences.
Yes.
It's a complementary strategy because if we build a fence, we might be able to benefit, say, the bilby, who has zero tolerance for any cat prevalence at all. But and so we need that. We don't want to leave the bilby behind. So I'm glad AWC has their important model. And equally, if we fence all of our reserves, gosh, there will be so many threatened species that suffer because they can't move through. And so we need to rely on volunteers, paid staff. Our staff are incredible and out there using and deploying everything available to us to keep our feral species numbers down and managing where we can. Um, we have got new technology that we're trialing through the Game Changers grant, which again is using like a camera trapping technology, but using AI so that the camera can actually recognize that it is a cat and then trigger the trap and then send a message straight to the reserve manager. The reserve manager can get out and ensure humane management of that species very swiftly. There are some parts of our reserves where a reserve manager can't get there quickly because they're just so large. And so, what the AI technology can allow is to put a call or some sort of deterrent out there so that the cat moves on in areas where we know we have high prevalence of threatened species. So, we're getting smarter, we're trialing new ways, we throw everything at it. You mentioned Bullcomata before. I think Bullcomata is one of those reserves where we're getting reward for effort. We have the yellow-footed rock wallaby that's moved into our reserve. It's chosen us. Build it and they shall come
Moved
because
a long way across the landscape, hasn't it, to get there?
right,
Mm.
because we're getting the feral management below a certain threshold where that species is able to survive. Similarly, with the plains wanderer on that reserve.
Yes, yes.
That's an indicator that we're managing to keep numbers lower. I mentioned red mort before. The Fitzsterling reserves, we're starting to see higher and higher prevalence of native threatened species coming into that corridor. Again, that's a sign that we're getting the management under the threshold many, not all, but many of our species need.
Excellent. We are having a stack of questions here today, Rachel, for you. So we'll see if we can move through the next few as quickly as we can to get to everybody. A question from Liz. This is probably a much bigger conversation, but do we have a position on the ecosystem damage from large-scale industrial renewable energy schemes? Which I guess is not necessarily our main bag, but is there?
Well, it's an emerging threat to healthy
Yes.
landscapes for sure. Our position really is in support of ensuring that renewable energy rollout is fast because we need it, obviously, as a global society facing climate change, is just and really listens to traditional custodian needs and ensures free prior informed consent before it's rolled out, but is also best, and that best is key. And this, I know that WWF are a strong voice for this as well, and other orgs increasingly. It cannot be that we are rolling out renewable energy to fix one problem and creating a whole other problem where we are depleting and completely destroying entire ecosystems in the wake of that rollout. And so making sure that biodiversity needs are considered as part of the planning is key. And it's why we're watching very closely what's happening with the EPBC nature law review. Whilst we're not at the table, that's not our theory of change. We're out there, boots on ground. We're certainly watching to see what happens with the EPBC reforms because we have got laws that should make it illegal to destroy threatened species habitat, and yet we know that it continues. So our position is not in favour of that kind of rollout. Rollouts for renewable energy need to be fast, they need to be just, and they need to be best.
Yeah, fantastic. Um, quick question from Judy Lambert, and this is: do you think our Australian tax systems are supporting or a deterrent to overseas donations?
I actually have not in my travels. I've managed to get to America twice and the UK once since I've been in this role. I've not seen it to be a deterrent. I think if anything, um, people looking at investing in Australian organisations like our own know that there is high levels of due diligence and that there is low levels of corruption across our government in regards to low risks of handing money over and it just disappearing, for example, which sadly can be the case. Some other landscapes that desperately need investment. And so I think that bodes well for Australia, but I'm not entirely sure. My read, based on those 3 trips, is it's not a big deterrent. If it is one, it's not a big one.
Cool. Um, there's a question here which I think we can respond to probably better offline and with some information and a link. But Mauritia has asked, what's the process for bush heritage property acquisition? We actually have done a webinar on that quite recently. I did a deep dive with Bex Spindler, our recent outgoing head of science and conservation, and that goes in some detail. So perhaps, Mauritia, I could direct you to that one, and we'll cover that one off in that webinar.
What I can say is that it's my favourite meeting of the month. We have a property
Yes.
acquisition steering group meeting every month.
Yeah.
And the science team bring maps and there's criteria and everything gets a score. So if we find out that a parcel of land within a priority landscape is available through word of mouth or because it's been put on the property market, there is a very rigorous process and recommendations then come through to the executive team. And I'm always just in awe of how much consideration is given to every single parcel of land. They're often the decisions that keep me awake at night as well, because we know we can't step in and protect them all. So with the resources that we have, we use the criteria to direct us to where the science tells us
Yes.
it's needed most.
Fantastic. Well, there's a lovely question from Peter here, which is talking to the fact that as our property holdings expand in terms of the land we manage, what's our strategy for local people and Indigenous management of some of that land? And I think that's a very relevant question, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question. We want to continue to deepen the impact of our partnerships as well. And so Bush Heritage Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander leadership team have just recently developed this sphere of influence, which in short helps us identify that let's look at traditional custodian groups we work with. Some groups will want to take a leading role in landscape management, and we need to find more opportunity to support that. Others will genuinely want to do co-design and walk step by step, like what we're doing with Jarrah in central Victoria. There are other groups, for example, that are just like, just call us in from time to time. We'd like to have access, but we don't really have the capacity or the want or the aspirations to manage that land with you or for you. And then there is no acquisition ever that takes place if we don't get the free prior informed consent from the respective traditional custodian group. I think what we'll see more of in the future, or what I hope to see more of in the future, if government really steps into the 30 by 30 place, I hope Bush Heritage will be able to support groups in being able to access funds or be able to share our science and our mapping and say, this is available, 500 million, or I think we put billion on it, is available. Let's, apply either as partners or perhaps to do Skillshare, etc. So partnerships take different shapes, forms, and will continue to respond to the needs of the time.
Good question from Lisa as well. Do we have an input or say into the review of the Australian government nature laws? You mentioned them a bit earlier.
Yeah, the only real input that we have is through an alliance we're part of called ALCA. We talked about the ALCA conference earlier, the Australian Land Conservation Alliance. ALCA Employer Policy Officer, Michael Cornish, who's awesome at what he does. So if you're on LinkedIn, he's worth a follow. And he comes out to members like ourselves, we're a member of ALCA, to get our input and then takes that private land conservation voice through to government and provides recommendations. But when our main theory of change is very much getting the boots out on the ground, and these are healthy patches of country managed and protected. And so we're keeping our focus there while supporting and providing advice when asked through that mechanism.
Absolutely. And I think that possibly also talks to the question about how much we're involved in activism. which I think we recognise is a very critical part of raising awareness and has its appropriate place, and we each focus on where our strengths are.
I've used that word theory of change a few times because there are lots of different environmental non-government organisations, and I believe we need all of them. Absolutely, there is no one org that will be able to rise to the challenge of our time alone. Uh, we're not an activist organisation. We do engagement with government. We'll share our science, we'll share our recommendations, but we don't, for example, collect petitions as because you're on this webinar supporting us. Equally, I'm grateful to those that do. Because they're raising awareness of issues. They're getting on with a different job whilst we get on with ours, and we need to turbocharge right across the full spectrum of the NGO space, I believe, given the crisis that we're in.
Well, we're coming up close to time, so I think we've got one last question, which I think speaks to our agricultural partners. And there's a really nice question from Steve, who says that uh, retention of regrowth on grazing land is perhaps one of the easiest way to make gains in places like Queensland, and suggesting that support and partnership with the regen and adaptive graziers and that whole model could be an option. And has Bush Heritage considered that?
Yeah, if I understand the question properly, which one is that one? Sorry.
Here, just here.
Like retention of regrowth grazing. Yes, support partnerships, regenerative adaptive grazers. Yes, we have, and so much so that since I joined the organisation, we now actually have a very focused portfolio in the organisation called Agriculture and Natural Capital, and that team's remit really is to explore exactly that and try to find ways for us to accelerate our mission and our impact by working with pastoralists and agriculturalists.
Well, I think that wraps up the questions that we can get to in the time we've got available. As always, we will do our best to have a look at the ones we couldn't get to, have a chat with Rachel or whoever's the best person, and we will get back to you after the webinar with a response and an answer to make sure everybody's questions are covered. So thanks everybody for your time today. Just a reminder that all the webinars that we've done are available from our website. And Megan, I think we'll put a link in. So we referenced the one on how we purchase properties a bit earlier on, but of course the whole suite are on there, and there's some great stories. And please feel free to pass that on to any family and friends. We're finding increasingly that people are making inquiries. So what is it you do with Bush Heritage? And it's lovely to sometimes just give them a chance to listen to a conversation from a webinar or point them to the website and let them explore at their own pace, perhaps a new supporter involvement, which would be lovely. Rachel, thank you so much for your time today. We've gone over the hour. I swore we'd take an hour, but it's an hour and 4 minutes. So thank you, and apologies for taking up more of your time.
It's been a treat. It really has. Thank you so much for joining us. I've loved this hour, and I appreciate the invitation.
Excellent. Well, the good news is we're scheduling another webinar March next year, where we'll be talking about Bush Heritage being at the halfway point of its 2030 strategy and taking a look at how are we doing, what are the challenges going forward, and what are the successes, and what does the curve look like to get to some of those objectives. So look forward to that. As always, Rachel's already put a thank you out to all our wonderful supporters. I'd like to add that too, because when I travel around the country, I come across some wonderful volunteers, wonderful donors, and it's the bit that is the biggest joy to see just how much people are willing to put into supporting the common cause that we have for this wonderful Australian bush. We'll finish with our impact report, which we talked about. There were some questions around that and some suggestions from Rachel about where to go to look for answers. So Megan's going to run that now at the end. So rather than our lovely traditional run through of some pictures, we'll actually run the little video, which is only a couple of minutes, which shares some of the insights of the last year. And of course, you can go online and get the full report. We'll put the link into that. So look forward to seeing you soon. Before that March webinar, we will be doing a final webinar for the year. That'll be live from somewhere in Queensland. We have to be mysterious because it's not fully done and dusted, but we hope to be announcing a new reserve in Queensland. And we will talk to you then and share the excitement and talk to what we need to do to make that safe. So thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Rachel. It's been a joy and a pleasure, as always, and look forward to talking to everybody next time. Cheerio.
Thank you for another amazing, impactful year. Imagine this. We're standing on budgety country, Nari Station Reserve in northwest New South Wales. The sun sets and a choir of migratory birds fills the air. In that moment, there is a shared sense of hope and an appreciation of the beauty and importance of this vital freshwater system and everything that depends on it. With your support, we successfully acquired Nildesperandum, which neighbours Nari. This was just one of the ways you helped us step up for nature this year. Across the country, you stood with us again, helping protect Dodgy Downs on Gureng Noongar country, southwest Western Australia. In addition to acquiring land, thanks to you, we've implemented bold new strategies to protect native species and the landscapes they call home. From building stronger partnerships with traditional custodians and farmers, to innovative approaches to invasive cat management. Over the past 12 months, floods, fires and storms have been felt across the country, including on our reserves and on partners' lands. These events remind us of the urgency of our work and the need to adapt to achieve impact at scale. Every step we took this year brought us closer to our ambitious goals, doubling the land we actively protect by 2030 and deepening our impact across all of it. None of this is possible without you. Our supporters are the reason I can say with confidence, across 22.5 million hectares, you're helping us step up for nature. Thank you. Here's to healthy country, protected forever.